The first ever automatic watch from Casio, but mine has a few problems. Now, I'll admit that I was very excited about this watch when it first got announced. After all, I'm a big fan of Casio, a big fan of their Edifice range, and I'm a big fan of automatic watches. So to me, it seemed like a recipe for success. But truth be told, I've got mixed feelings on this one. There's some areas that are brilliant, but also some that I just don't like. And then there's a couple of quality control issues that, to be honest, are just a little bit disappointing. Hello there, my name is Kieran, welcome to Top Tier Ticker. I hope you're having a good day. So, the new Casio Automatic. I decided to go for the green dial version because, well, I like a little bit of colour, and I paid £216 brand new for this one from an authorised dealer, although full retail price is actually £269. I was a little bit surprised that I managed to get a discount off retail price already. Maybe these aren't selling as well as Casio first hoped. Now, what is super interesting about this new release is that it's actually received a mixed response from watch enthusiasts. A lot of the reviews that I've watched have been rather critical about this new watch, which is very surprising considering this is a watch that should appeal to collectors, more so than most other Casio watches. I mean, Casio has ticked almost every single box with this new watch. Spec-wise, they've made something that competes and in some areas even outperforms Japanese competition, but maybe in that ticking the box exercise, they've lost that Casio charm that us collectors appreciate. You see, this watch just doesn't feel like a Casio. On the wrist, in hands, even the small things like using the crown, it feels like an alien experience when you see that Casio logo on the dial. Most of that, of course, can be put down to the use of a mechanical movement here, you know, because the watch is a lot heavier than your typical Casio. But I also just don't think this looks like a Casio watch. So I'll quickly run you through the specifications of this watch just in case you've been living under a rock and haven't seen them yet. Then we'll get on to two pretty big quality control issues that I've had with mine. But see if you can spot the QC issues during the footage. Okay, so we have a full stainless steel construction throughout, which is typical with the Casio Edifice range. There's a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces throughout, and Casio have gone for that sharp, angular look with the transitions. This is an integrated bracelet piece, so the transition from case to bracelet is smooth, and the bracelet features a taper from 21.5mm to 17.5mm. The clasp is surprisingly milled on the lower, but the upper section seems to be pressed and for sure feels like the lowest quality part of the watch. There's only two levels of micro adjustment here, which is a big letdown in my opinion. There was literally nothing stopping them making the clasp a little bit longer and adding a few more holes, although I will give them props for using a regular clasp instead of the horrible butterfly that you can find on the likes of the PRX. Casio of course opted for a display case back on this one to show off the use of their first ever mechanical movement inside of a Casio. But don't be expecting a good looking movement in the back of this one. This is your standard Seiko NH35 that I'm sure you've all seen a million times already. The push-pull crown is unsigned, which I'll be honest is a tad disappointing, but Casio did manage to achieve a 10 bar water pressure rating, so this watch is capable of some serious water submersion. The front crystal is indeed a piece of sapphire, which is always brilliant to see from a big brand for £250, although as other reviewers have already pointed out, it certainly doesn't have the best clarity. I doubt any anti-reflective treatment has been used here. The crystal often has a dull look to it just because of the lack of AR. In terms of the quality of finishing on the steel, it's a proper mixed bag with this one. The case finishing is decent. The brush surfaces in particular are pretty good, but the finishing to the bracelet is subpar. There's too many areas of inconsistencies for me to even point out. It's just generally not very good. In terms of ergonomics though, everything feels fine. The clasp is fairly pleasant to use, and the crown is just about a good enough size to operate. On the wrist, this one does wear slightly larger than you might expect. Case diameter, on my calipers anyway, comes in at 38.5mm, case thickness is 12.2mm, and the lug-to-lug including the fixed end links is 48.3mm. I'd say this one wears slightly better than the PRX, but not as good as the Citizen Soyosa. Casio hasn't done a good job at making the case curve around the wrist. It wears quite flat, which I know is sort of the point with this style of watch, but you can see the case back from the side profile, which I don't think is a very pretty sight. The watch can occasionally feel top heavy, so you'll likely want to wear this one more tight than loose. Now the loom here is basically non-existent. There's a light application on the handset, but to be honest, they shouldn't have bothered. The dial design is fine. Casio hasn't taken any risks or gone crazy here. They've kept everything simple and clean. Applied index is around the dial, with a double applied index at the 12 for quick orientation. But props to Casio for a 6 o'clock date window. I always appreciate some nice symmetry. And there is plenty of depth throughout the dial. The chapter ring slopes inwards, and then there's a raised ring around the dial, and a carbon-like finish throughout the dial surface. This is only a faux finish mimicking the look of carbon, but still, it's actually quite good looking. Better than a regular sunburst finish in my opinion. Generally, Casio is offering a really good spec sheet with this watch for the price. I'd say the quality here is generally good, but not outstanding. I have experienced much better at this price point, Citizen being the obvious one to point to with the Soyosa. But what's really spoiled my enjoyment for this watch is two quite basic QC issues. Now the first one is very strange, something that I've not seen before. One of the links has awful finishing, and by that I mean it has this huge lump on one link that just looks awful when playing with it against the light. Now this usually wouldn't be too much of an issue, you know, because you can just remove that singular link. But it was from the section where the bracelet ends the taper. So I've obviously removed it, but now I'm left with two links that don't quite sit right against each other. Both tilt in opposite directions rather than sitting flat. So either I can have a bracelet that doesn't quite sit right, or a bracelet that has a link with a big lump in it. Obviously, it would be ideal not to have to make that decision. And the second QC issue is definitely the worst. The chapter ring just doesn't line up with the dial. Turns out that as soon as you use a Seiko movement, you also inherit all of the Seiko problems. Either the dial is slightly off to the right, or the chapter ring is slightly off to the left. I do occasionally forgive a slight bit of misalignment if I think it's within tolerances, but I don't think this one is. That 30-minute marker is almost to the very left of the 6 o'clock index. The strange part is that the alignment seems to be perfect at the 12 o'clock, certainly within tolerances anyway, but the bottom is definitely not, as you can see. So is this just a printing issue, and is it common across a lot of the watches? Either way, these are two quality control issues that I don't want on my watch. I don't want to look down at my watch and see a misaligned bezel or a dodgy bit of finishing on the bracelet. It just cheapens the experience, especially when my other £250 watches don't have these issues. So with those two pretty big QC issues considered, what's my verdict on this Casio automatic? Well, this watch is good value for money, don't get me wrong. Spec-wise, it's great value on paper, it ticks a lot of boxes, but for me, there's just something missing here. I'd personally rather own one of the quartz Casio Edifice models, specifically this model that I've owned in the past. I just feel like it's got a lot more charm about it and character than this new automatic. And I think design-wise, it's just a little bit meh. There's nothing you can actually point to as a standout feature, and there's no real quirks to speak of. It's just another mechanical integrated bracelet that's about 2 years too late. Now, don't get me wrong, I do really like the dial finish on this one. The faux forged carbon is pretty nice to look at, but the subpar finishing to the bracelet massively cheapens the experience. And those two QC issues are stinky. If you're going to make an integrated bracelet watch, that means you can't swap out the bracelet for a strap. You better make sure that you have a good bracelet. For me though, this one just falls short. The bracelet links don't conform to the wrist nicely, the finishing doesn't offer a nice wrist roll, and I think the actual design of the bracelet links just doesn't inspire me. And when it comes to the choice of movement, if Casio are going to continue creating mechanical watches, I'd for sure like to see Casio develop their own in-house movement. They certainly have the facilities capable of that. I genuinely don't mind them testing the waters with a Seiko automatic to see what the reception's like, but that does make this watch very easy to compare with others because it has such a generic movement that's used by so many different watch brands. This is a good start from Casio in terms of an automatic watch, but I think they've got a way to go. I bought this watch to review, and it will be for sure going to a new home after I've made this review. If you're a die-hard Casio fan and this watch appeals to you, obviously go and buy it, you'll probably enjoy it. But if, like me, you're a micro-brand collector, I'd honestly say give this one a miss. Unless the design really speaks to you and you think it's exceptionally good looking, I don't think anything here is going to impress you. So if you've got £250 and you want an automatic integrated bracelet watch from a Japanese watch brand, go and buy the Citizen Soyosa. Subscribe if you're new around here, I'd love to have you. And why not go and check out my Citizen Soyosa review if you've not yet seen it, see what all the fuss is about. Maybe you don't think it's better, maybe you do. Go and check it out, I'll see you over there. Bye for now.